At our family's Sunday dinner, my brother Timothy slid a folded job application across the table toward me. His voice was slow, full of that practiced concern he always used. "I'm just worried about you and Jordan, Sarah. You can't keep going like this. You need a steady job to provide for your daughter." My parents leaned in with smirks. Dad muttered, "She's pretty useless, isn't she?" Mom added, "Yeah, really useless." About 20 relatives sat around the table watching in silence. My 12-year-old daughter Jordan sat beside me, her face turning bright red as she stared down at her plate. The application was for a janitorial position, basic cleaning, at the large auto parts distribution company, where Timothy had been a mid-level supply chain manager for 10 years. He smiled like he was handing me a lifeline. I picked up the paper, folded it neatly, and met his eyes. "Thanks, Tim. I'll pass this along to my assistant, someone you probably know pretty well." The room went completely still. Timothy's smile vanished. His face went pale. "What assistant?" he demanded, voice rising. "What are you talking about?" Every fork stopped midair. Everyone stared. And that was the moment I realized none of them had ever really known who I was. If you want to know what happened when I finally spoke up and the whole table flipped, stick around until the end, because the look on his face when the truth hit was absolutely priceless. Timothy leaned forward, his voice still sharp, but now edged with irritation. "Come on, Sarah. An assistant. Since when do you have an assistant?" I let the silence hang for a second, feeling Jordan shift beside me. She had been staring at her plate, but now she slowly lifted her head, her eyes flicking toward me. The truth was, the tension between Timothy and me went back as far as I could remember. He was 5 years older, the firstborn son, and from the start our parents treated him like he was made of something special. When we were kids, if we both brought home good report cards, his was always the one pinned to the fridge longer. Mine got a quick good job before it disappeared into a drawer. He got the new bike first. I got his hand-me-down. If we argued, I was usually the one told to apologize even when he started it. It wasn't huge things, it was 1,000 small ones that added up to a clear message: Timothy mattered more. When I married Keith, Timothy smirked at the wedding and told anyone who would listen that it probably wouldn't last. He said Keith was too nice for me, whatever that meant. 8 years ago, when Keith died in a car accident on his way home from work, Timothy showed up at the funeral with Cynthia, his wife of 3 years at the time, and pulled me aside. "If you need anything, just call," he said, squeezing my shoulder like he was the strong one now. I thanked him. I was 29, suddenly alone with a 4-year-old, and I thought maybe the loss would finally bring us closer. It didn't. At first, their visits felt almost supportive. Timothy and Cynthia would drop by on weekends with groceries or take Jordan to the park so I could have a break. Timothy gave me long talks about getting back out there, finding a routine, maybe taking some online classes. He meant well, or at least, that's what I told myself. But gradually the tone shifted. The groceries started coming with comments about how expensive everything was getting and how hard it must be on a single income. The park outings came with questions about whether Jordan was keeping up with the other kids since some of her clothes looked a little worn. Then came the open digs. One Thanksgiving, about 5 years ago, they showed up with 2 big foil trays of leftovers from their own dinner. Cynthia handed them over with a bright smile. "We had so much extra and we thought you could use it. Feeding a growing girl on your own must be tough on the budget." I thanked them, put the trays in the fridge, and later threw most of it away because the message behind the gesture stung too much to eat. Another time, Cynthia called out of the blue to ask about Jordan's school. "Private tutoring is expensive these days," she said. "If you ever need help covering something like that, just let us know. We'd hate for Jordan to fall behind." I told her we were fine. She paused, then added, "Of course, no pressure. We just worry." And our house, the one Keith and I bought together, became a regular topic. Dad would drive by sometimes, and later mention at family gatherings how the paint was peeling or the yard needed work. "Place is starting to look run down," he'd say, shaking his head. "Hard to keep up alone, I guess." Mom would nod along, then offer to send over their lawn guy as a favor. The old car I still drove didn't escape either. Timothy loved pointing out how unreliable it must be, how I should think about trading it in before it left me stranded with Jordan. He never asked how I was actually managing. He just assumed I wasn't. I stayed quiet through all of it. Part of me hoped that if I didn't push back, they'd eventually see I was okay. But deep down, I knew I was keeping my real life separate for a reason I wasn't ready to share. Jordan was watching me now, her earlier embarrassment fading into something closer to curiosity. She sensed the shift in the room, the way everyone's eyes were on me. Timothy broke the quiet with a short, dismissive laugh, the kind that said he'd already decided I was bluffing. "Nice try, Sarah," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm and a fresh wave of annoyance. But seriously, what assistant? I held his gaze and reached for my phone. I placed the phone on the table screen facing Timothy. The email was already open to an internal report from Apex Parts, the mid-sized auto components manufacturer I had quietly invested in years earlier. It wasn't the kind of company that made headlines. It supplied brakes, suspension parts, and sensors to bigger distributors across the Midwest. One of those distributors, the largest in fact, was the firm where Timothy had spent the last decade climbing the supply chain ladder. I didn't say anything at first. I just let him read. The report listed key accounts, delivery priorities, and pricing agreements for the upcoming quarter. Near the top, under Preferred Partners, was the name of Timothy's employer. Next to it were notes about stable pricing and expedited orders, notes that had my initials attached from the last 3 board strategy meetings I'd attended virtually. Timothy scrolled, his thumb moving faster. At first, a loud, forced laugh escaped him. "No way," he said, shaking his head like it was all some joke. "This can't be real." "Sarah, come on." But as he kept reading, the laugh died. His eyes narrowed on a section detailing client contacts. There, in black and white, was his own name listed as the primary liaison for the account. The report thanked him personally for smooth coordination over the past year and referenced decisions that had kept costs, predictable decisions I had quietly supported in board discussions to avoid disruptions during market fluctuations. He stopped scrolling. The color drained from his face. Cynthia leaned over his shoulder, trying to see what had shut him up so completely. That's just a coincidence, right?" She stammered, her voice thin. "Same name or something?" Dad cleared his throat, but no words came out. He and Mom exchanged a quick, uneasy glance, something between confusion and the first flicker of doubt. Across from me, Jordan's posture changed. She had been tense all evening, shoulders hunched, but now she sat up straighter. A small, uncertain smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, and her eyes brightened as she looked at me. It was the first real spark I'd seen in her since we arrived. The rest of the table had gone uncomfortably quiet. Cousins who had been whispering earlier now stared openly. Forks hovered forgotten over plates. The smug energy that had filled the room minutes ago evaporated, replaced by a thick, awkward confusion. Timothy handed the phone back without another word at first. Then he tried again, quieter this time. "How long?" he asked, almost to himself. I took the phone and locked the screen. "Long enough," I said. "I'm one of the larger shareholders in Apex Parts. I also sit on the strategic board. For the past several years, I've pushed to keep pricing steady and give priority routing to certain distributors, yours included, whenever the numbers got tight. It wasn't charity. It was just good long-term business. But it did make your job a lot easier than most people in your position." Timothy opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "You never said anything," he finally managed. "No," I replied. "I didn't." Cynthia forced a nervous laugh. "Well, this is surprising." "Good for you, Sarah." "Really?" But her tone didn't match the words. Mom shifted in her seat, looking suddenly unsure of where to put her hands. Dad rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting between me and Timothy. Jordan's small smile grew a little steadier. She reached under the table and gave my hand a quick squeeze. The easy confidence everyone had walked in with was gone. In its place was a heavy, unsettled silence, the kind that comes when people realize the story they've been telling themselves about someone else might have been completely wrong. Timothy leaned back in his chair, arms crossed tight, trying to look unfazed but failing. He forced another short laugh, this one brittle. "Okay, fine," he said, voice tight with frustration. "You've got some investments. Impressive. But let's not pretend this changes anything." Timothy tried to hold eye contact, but his gaze flickered away. Timothy tried to regain his composure, his voice dropping but still unsteady. "Why didn't you ever say anything sooner?" he asked, questions piling up quickly. "If you've been part of this the whole time, why stay silent? Why let us believe you were barely getting by?" He scanned the table for agreement, finding none. Cynthia spoke up fast, her words protective. "We were only trying to help Sarah. All those times we offered suggestions or stopped by, it was because we were worried. We truly wanted the best for you." Dad added his weight slowly. "Family looks out for one another," he said, though the conviction sounded thinner than usual. Mom supported him quietly. "That's right. We're meant to be there for each other no matter what." I paused, letting their statements hang without immediate response. When I replied, I kept it brief. "Help in what way?" I asked evenly. "By forming opinions about my situation without ever checking the truth." Timothy's frown deepened. He adjusted his posture, searching for footing. "Sarah, you can't seriously blame us for caring," he insisted. "You kept everything so private, no details about work, no signs of stability. What were we supposed to think?" Mom tried to ease the tension. "We never wanted you handling everything solo. That's why we stepped in when we could." I regarded her steadily. And yet no one thought to ask me straight out how things actually stood. Another heavy pause settled over everyone. Cynthia attempted a soft chuckle that faded quickly. In the end, Jordan still needed responsible adults around her. Having the whole family involved gives kids that extra layer of support. Jordan, who had remained unusually still, raised her head fully at the remark. "I don't need that kind of involvement," she stated plainly, her voice carrying clear across the table. "I just need everyone to stop treating my mom like she's failing at everything." Cynthia's eyes widened briefly, color rising in her cheeks as she struggled for a comeback. She glanced toward Timothy, seeking backup that didn't come right away. Timothy's grip tightened on his water glass. "That's not fair." He started heatedly, but the energy drained midway. He couldn't summon a strong follow-up. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Mom pressed her lips together, avoiding eye contact. The wider family stayed motionless. No cousins offered opinions. No uncles cleared throats to change the subject. Utensils remained idle on plates. The lively hum of a normal gathering had vanished completely, replaced by strained silence and averted gazes. I didn't press further. The straightforward questions I'd raised stood on their own, and the weak replies, or lack of them, spoke volumes. Timothy made one last effort to redirect. "You're turning this into a bigger deal than it is," he claimed, attempting firmness. The statement landed without force. Cynthia took a slow drink, using the moment to regroup. Jordan maintained her direct gaze, the earlier shame replaced by calm determination. The entire dinner felt irreparably altered now. Normal conversation couldn't resume. Food sat cooling, largely uneaten. The self-assured atmosphere people brought with them had collapsed into obvious unease and withdrawal. Timothy crossed his arms once more, cheeks still flushed. He let out a frustrated breath, fingers drumming lightly on the table. I reached for my bag under the chair. I pushed the printed board report toward the center of the table. It was a copy of the most recent strategic summary I had received, complete with agendas, voting records, and projections for the coming year. Nothing classified, just enough to show the influence I had chosen to exercise quietly until now. Everyone's eyes followed it. I kept my voice level. I'm not going to use this for financial revenge, I said. I won't suddenly raise rates or cancel agreements out of spite. That's not how I operate. Timothy relaxed a fraction, but only for a second. What I am doing, I continued, is stepping back from the role I've played in making things easier for your company. No more quiet pushes for favorable terms when times get tight. From now on, every decision will be pure business market rates, standard competition, no behind-the-scenes consideration. Timothy's expression changed. The defensiveness drained away, replaced by genuine alarm. He knew exactly what that meant. Without those subtle protections, his division would face the same pressures every other distributor did. Performance reviews would get stricter. Margins would shrink. His position, built on years of relatively smooth sailing, would be directly on the line. He leaned forward again. Sarah, you can't be serious. That would hurt a lot of people, not just me. I met his eyes without blinking. It's not punishment, I said. It's simply removing a safety net that was never owed in the first place. Cynthia's hand went to her throat. But think about what you're saying. Dad found his voice at last. Sarah, don't do this to the family. We're all connected here. Mom reached across the table as if to touch my arm. Please, honey, we can talk this through. There's no need to go that far. I looked at each of them in turn. There's something else, I said. Starting today, I'm done. Timothy frowned. Done with what? With all of this, I replied. No more contact. No calls, no visits, no holiday invitations. We won't attend your events, and you won't be part of ours. Jordan and I will move forward without any of you in our lives. You're no longer family to us. The words fell heavy and final. Timothy's face went from red to pale in seconds. Real panic flashed across his features, the kind that comes when someone sees a foundation they counted on cracking beneath them. You wouldn't, he said, voice breaking slightly. You're angry right now, but cutting everyone off. Over this, I didn't answer him directly. Cynthia tried next. Sarah, think about Jordan. She needs her grandparents, her aunt and uncle. Jordan squeezed my hand tighter but stayed silent, her choice clear. Dad's voice rose a little. This is extreme. We're blood. You don't just walk away from blood. Mom's eyes filled. Please don't do this. We love you both. I stood up slowly, chair scraping against the floor. The room held its breath. I took Jordan's hand. She rose beside me without hesitation. I've thought about it for years, I said. And this is the decision. Timothy half stood. Wait, Sarah. I didn't wait. We walked toward the door, past the silent relatives, past the untouched desserts, past the heavy air that had turned suffocating. No one else spoke. No one followed. I didn't look back. 3 months after that dinner, word started reaching me through distant channels. 6 months after that dinner, I got news from one of Timothy's old colleagues. He reached out casually through a mutual industry contact, asking if I'd heard about the changes at the distribution company. I hadn't spoken to anyone in the family since walking out, but word traveled in professional circles. The first shifts were subtle. Without the quiet advocacy I'd provided in board meetings, Apex Parts treated Timothy's employer like any other client. Pricing stayed fair but no longer carried those small buffers I used to push for during rough quarters. Delivery schedules followed standard protocols instead of occasional fast-tracking. Nothing dramatic, just the removal of advantages that had added up over time. The industry was already tightening. Supply chain disruptions lingered from global events, and raw material costs fluctuated. Companies everywhere scrambled to protect margins. Timothy's firm felt the squeeze harder than before because one of their key suppliers now operated strictly by the book. Performance metrics started slipping in his division. Deadlines tightened. Complaints from downstream customers rose. Upper management took notice. Around the 8-month mark, Timothy was demoted. He moved from supply chain manager to a senior coordinator role, still decent pay, but a clear step down with less authority and a smaller team. Colleagues said he took it quietly, at first blaming market conditions. Jordan and I, meanwhile, settled into a rhythm that felt lighter. We planned our first short trip together, a long weekend at a lakeside cabin a few hours away. No big announcements, just packing bags and driving off with the windows down. Jordan chatted the whole way about school projects and friends, her voice steadier than it had been in years. Back home, we upgraded small things without fanfare. New laptops for her online classes, a fresh coat of paint in the living room. Simple choices that didn't scream wealth, but removed the constant, careful budgeting we'd lived under for appearance's sake. By the one-year anniversary of that dinner, the distribution company announced a major restructuring. They consolidated departments, eliminated redundant positions, and focused on leaner operations to stay competitive. Timothy's role didn't survive the cut. He received a standard severance package, generous enough for a few months, but not indefinite security. Word came indirectly again. Someone forwarded an internal memo that leaked into industry forums. His name appeared on the list of departures. Financial pressure built gradually for him and Cynthia. Mortgage payments, car loans, private school tuition for their kids, all on one reduced income now. Arguments grew frequent from what little filtered through shared acquaintances. They tried counseling for a while, but the strain proved too much. 15 months after our last family gathering, they separated. Cynthia moved into a smaller apartment closer to her job. Timothy stayed in the house but took on side consulting that didn't cover the gaps. My parents tried reaching out multiple times. The first calls came within weeks. Voicemails full of apologies and requests to talk. I let them go unanswered. Letters followed, handwritten notes about missing Jordan and wanting to make amends. Emails arrived with subject lines like, "We're sorry," or "Please, let us see our granddaughter." I blocked the numbers, marked the emails as spam, and returned the letters unopened. Jordan noticed the attempts but never asked me to respond. She seemed relieved by the quiet. We took another trip that fall, a quick flight to the coast for a few days of walking beaches and eating seafood. Jordan laughed more easily, stood taller in photos, and talked openly about colleges she might apply to one day. The hesitation that used to color her words around extended family topics disappeared. Life for us became uncomplicated in ways it hadn't been before. No more navigating unspoken judgments or forced gratitude. Just forward motion. 18 months in, the separation between Timothy and Cynthia turned permanent. They filed quietly, dividing assets and arranging custody for their children. Timothy found a lower-level position at a smaller firm, starting over in many ways. My parents stopped trying after about a year. The messages slowed, then ceased. Jordan and I kept building our own routines. Now Jordan is 15 and everything feels different. Now Jordan is 15 and we're closer than ever. She's shot up over the past couple of years and stands almost eye to eye with me when we're both barefoot in the kitchen. Her posture is different too. Shoulders back, chin level, the kind of quiet confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. The hesitant girl who used to shrink at family gatherings has grown into someone who meets people's eyes and speaks when she has something to say. On weekends, we often sit together at the dining table with my laptop open to industry reports. I walk her through the latest numbers from Apex Parts production trends, supplier updates, market forecasts. She leans in, pen in hand, jotting notes in the margins of printed pages. Her questions surprise me sometimes with their sharpness: why certain components face longer lead times, how electric vehicle shifts affect demand for traditional parts, what margins look like after raw material spikes. She absorbs it all, connecting dots faster than I expected. One evening last month, as we closed the files, she looked up and said, "I think I want to study business when I go to college, but I want to do it the right way. The kind where you build things up without tearing anyone else down." I smiled at that. It wasn't a rehearsed line. It was just Jordan thinking out loud after months of watching how decisions ripple through companies and lives. Looking back, I have zero regrets about the choice I made that night at the dinner table. Cutting ties completely wasn't easy at first. There were moments early on when old habits tugged, wondering if a holiday card might soften things or if a quick reply to one of Mom's messages could keep some door cracked open. But every time I waited, the answer stayed the same. Toxic patterns don't fix themselves just because time passes or blood is shared. Staying connected would have meant accepting a dynamic where judgment and superiority were normal, and I wasn't willing to model that for Jordan anymore. Protecting our peace turned out to be one of the best decisions I've ever made. We're free to plan our own traditions, spend holidays however we want, and build relationships based on mutual respect instead of obligation. Jordan thrives in that space. She has friends whose families we host without second-guessing, teachers who praise her initiative, and a growing sense of what she wants her future to look like. I've grown too. Work feels more focused without the background noise of unsolicited opinions. Board meetings are straightforward debates about strategy, not veiled personal negotiations. The company continues to do well, and my role in it remains steady. Sometimes people ask old friends or distant acquaintances if I ever hear from my parents or Timothy. I tell them the truth, no. And I'm okay with that. Jordan knows the story at the level appropriate for her age. She doesn't ask for updates or express longing for people who made her feel small. She's busy living forward. The lesson I carry from all of it is simple but powerful. Sometimes the strongest move you can make is to remove the relationships that keep pulling you backward. Letting go of people who diminish you, even when they share your history, creates room for growth, peace, and the kind of love that lifts everyone involved. Jordan and I have that now. And it's more than enough.